today, starting next semester. So anyway, what's going on in the big world of politics and news and so on and so forth, particularly alternative news? Well, let's take a look. Okay, starting out with finance news. Very interesting story about Jamie Dimon. He's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Exxon Monsanto. And he recently made some crazy comments about, I don't understand why people are against us because we're rich. And obviously, that's not at all what the thing is. And someone wrote a really awesome follow-up to that. And here in a second, I'm going to play you the clip of Jamie Dimon talking about that. And then we're going to go over kind of this follow-up letter. And the letter was written by a guy named Josh Brown, and this is from ritholtz.com blog. So here is Jamie Dimon asking the big question, what do these people have against the rich? Here we go.
But here's what I'd like to hear from our politicians. This country, the United States, I'm sorry if you're from somewhere else, okay, still is the best country on this planet, particularly regarding business. We have the best military on the planet, and we will for decades. We have the best universities on the planet. The rest of the world's coming up. We have among the best. We have the best rule of law on the planet. You don't spend a lot of time worrying about corruption or ownership until recently in this country.
Okay, so here he is bragging up the United States, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm going to fast forward ahead a little bit. Again, this is Jamie Dimon, the chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Exxon Monsanto. And he is going to continue on asking a very big question.
And, and if you ask, I've worked on Wall Street most of my life. If you ask most people on Wall Street, they don't mind paying. We're not, I don't know, Warren Buffett gets mostly dividends and interest income, which is why it's his 17%. But most of us, wage earners, okay, are paying 39.6%, and now I guess it could be 12 or something in New York and the state. 50%, I don't mind paying 50%. And just like President Obama, I would love to lift up the poor, the impoverished, the inner city school kids. But we still want a meritocracy. We still got to build, we have a wonderful country, and that's what we should be doing, helping people get by. That's all. And so, yeah, that's what I'd be talking about if I was a politician running, which I'm not, by the way. I mean, acting like everyone who's been successful is bad, and that because you're rich, you're bad. I don't understand it. I don't get it.
Obviously not, Mr. Dimon. Because you're rich, you're bad. That's his perception of what all the complaining is all about. By the way, JP Morgan Chase primarily runs all welfare programs and food stamps. So yes, of course he wants to help the poor. They make money doing it. Okay? Anyway, so I just wanted to play that. Now, here is a follow-up letter. Again, this is from Josh Brown from ritholtz.com, a blog. And he says, I'm writing to profess my utter disbelief at how little you seem to understand the current mood of the nation. In a story at Bloomberg, a handful of bankers called yourselves job creators, blah, 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 blah. He goes on. Letter to Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Exxon Monsanto. America is different than almost every other place on earth in that its citizenry reveres the wealthy, and we are raised to believe that we can all one day join the ranks of the rich. The lack of a caste system or visible rungs of society's ladder is what separates our empire from so many fallen empires throughout history. In a nation bereft of loyal by virtue of its Republican birth, the American people have done what any other resourceful people would do. We've created our own royalty, and our royalty is the 1%. Not only do we not, quote-unquote, hate the rich, moron, as you and other embattled plutocrats have postulated, in point of fact, we love them. We worship our rich to the point of obsession. You got to admit that's pretty true. Okay, the highest rated television shows informally feature unanimously famous families of celebrities, not to mention housewives, blah, blah, blah. Now, some of that's mainstream media garbage. Okay. Then he goes on to say, when Derek Jeter was toyed with by the New York Yankees when it came time for him to renew his next $100 million contract, the people emphasized with Derek Jeter. Sure, this disagreement essentially took place between one of the wealthiest organizations in the country and one of the wealthiest private citizens, but we rooted for Jeter to get his money. Nobody begrudged him a penny of it, or wanted a piece of it, or decried the fact that he was luckier than the rest of us. In the American psyche, Jeter was one of the good guys who was deservedly successful. He was one of us, an example of hard work paying off. Okay, so he goes on to say about Steve Jobs, which I'm not going to read because I disagree with the Steve Jobs because I've talked about that before. Okay, no, Jamie, it is not that Americans hate successful people or the wealthy. In fact, it is just the opposite. We love the success stories of in our midst, and it is a distinctly American trait to believe that we can all follow in the footsteps of the elite, even though so few of us ever actually do. So no, we don't hate the rich. What we hate are the predators. Oh, that's awesome. And I'll let you read the rest. This again is RITHOLTZ.com. Response to JP Morgan saying, I don't understand why people don't love the rich. Why do they hate us? Okay. So anyway, that's a beginning of the finance news tonight. Okay, here's another story going on back into kind of more what's actually happening into the world. What's happening in Europe. This is from goldmoney.com. This is from December 20th. It says, will European central banks sell their gold? Because as I've been telling you on this show, central banks are buying gold at a record pace. And what's happening in Europe with all the bailouts, and by the way, Christine Lagarde, right on cue, came out yesterday on Christmas. Yeah, the world's about to collapse. You're going to have to give out more bailouts, more bailouts, more bailouts. The purpose of it all, of course, is to confiscate their gold and to confiscate their assets, such as Italy's privatization of their water. I got a nice water privatization story for you later on. Okay. This is from Gold Money, and it says, some market observers believe that the most indebted Eurozone countries will ultimately resort to selling their gold. Italy's central bank owns 2,452 metric tons of gold, the world's fourth largest holding. So it goes on and says, according to the data from the World Gold Council, only the U.S., Germany, and the International Monetary Fund own more gold than Italy. So they're going after Italy's gold. They already got their water. They already privatized Italy's water. That's what all these bailouts are for. Now, that's on goldmoney.com. I'm going to let you go ahead and look that stuff up. Okay, so I'm going to go on. I've been following hedge funds a lot. As you know, those of you listening to the Mark David Show faithfully every week around the world. And hedge funds, there's a lot of fraud going on in hedge funds, a lot of arrests going on in hedge funds. Okay, so this is from finalternatives.com. Okay, I'll give you this website. This is an awesome hedge fund website. That is hedge fund news. You need to follow hedge funds. If you're not following hedge fund news, you're not following news. I'll just tell you straightforward right now. If you don't know what hedge funds are doing, you don't know what anyone's doing. Okay, if you think, oh, well, I follow the news and I know about the Boehner debate versus Obama and but you're an idiot if you think that's actual news, honestly. You think... What was the big deal? I'm going to play a video. What was the big deal about the insider trading recently? It was that these congressmen were meeting with hedge fund managers, and the hedge fund managers were telling congressmen what's happening, and the Congress were investing in what the hedge fund managers were saying. I've even played you a clip on this show of Kyle Bass, hedge fund manager out of Texas, saying how he would meet with Barney Frank frequently. Okay, and I don't know if Barney Frank insider traded. I'm sure he did because he was on the Banking Finances Committee. But anyway, point is, if you're not following hedge fund news, you don't know what's going on. Anyway, this is from December 22nd. Hedge fund fraudster pleads guilty. It just says a Utah hedge fund manager has admitted to defrauding investors of more than $30 million. And why is this? This is finalternatives.com. Why is that important? Well, it's largely because while they're busting these hedge fund managers for $10, $20, $30 million, John Corzine at MF Global just totally not only ran off with billions of dollars, JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon's bank, not only ran off with the exact amount of silver that went missing in those MF Global accounts, not only did they go in and steal people's money right out of their accounts, not only were they gambling leveraged 40 times with investors' personal accounts, which is totally illegal. Not only were they doing that, but they've completely created chaos and destroyed confidence in the United States commodity market to the point that, as I was telling you last week, money is flooding out of New York right now. Thanks largely to John Corzine. Okay, so we're going on with hedge fund news, though. Okay, so this is from CNBC.com, and this is part of that Fast Money program. So from December 20th, investors lose faith in stocks as billions pour out of funds. There you go. Thank you, John Corzine. It was going to happen anyway. But anyway, this just goes on to say that money, of course, as I was saying last week, is flooding out of the United States. It's flooding out of stocks, and it's flooding out of commodities. Now, here's the thing. One of the biggest commodities dealers, so I've played some of his clips on the show, his name's Jim Rogers. He made a statement that Bob Chapman had made prior that I talked about, that eventually what will probably happen to your 401ks and your IRAs, and I've talked about this on this show, that's going to get your money's going to get taken. It's going to get lost, and it's going to get taken, and they're going to replace it with long-term U.S. Treasury bonds, which are about as worthless as any piece of paper you can find and write an IOU on it. And largely the reason, okay, how is it worthless? Okay, well, you know what it's backed by? It's certainly not backed by the taxes of the United States, which are dwindling. It's backed by the bombs that the United States will drop on people if they try to leave the U.S. Treasury bond market, such as Gaddafi, who tried to create his own gold dinar, such as Saddam Hussein, who tried to trade oil in euros. Okay, because what is the petrodollar? It's a deal to trade oil for U.S. dollars. If you're a country and you try to leave that deal, you get killed. You get called a terrorist. You get called not a terrorist. I'm sorry. Your underlings are called terrorists. You get called a dictator. Surely Saddam Hussein was a dictator. Surely Gaddafi was a dictator. But there were also people that were trying to trade money in currencies other than the U.S. dollar, the petrodollar. Gaddafi, by the way, was bilked out of $1 billion by J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs. Before that, he lost all $1 billion of his investment that Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of the UK, went over and swindled him out of, and then they killed him. I'm just saying. These people have completely shattered faith in the United States, certainly the commodity market, thanks to MF Global. And right now, it kind of remains to be seen. Okay, going on, stock fund news. We got another fraud case. This is, okay, Falcone says no to settlement with ban. This is from December 22nd. This is also from Fin Alternatives. Harbinger Capital Management founder Philip Falcone rejected a Securities Exchange Commission settlement offer that included a multi-year ban from the securities industry. Okay, the SEC is looking into civil fraud charges stemming from several matters, including among them possible manipulative debt trading, a controversial $111 million loan Falcone took to pay a tax bill, and allegations that Harbinger, the company he works for, gave preferential treatment to some redeeming investors, including, are you ready for this? Goldman Sachs. Of course, he turned down the deal. I'm going to follow that story because I'd like to see if they're going to bust him. You give Goldman Sachs preferential treatment, hey, you're probably their buddy. Okay, I'm going to go down the Fin Alternatives headlines real fast, and then we're gonna listen to some awesome music. Okay, Paulson and Company, a hedge fund I've been following a long time that Occupy Wall Street went to his house. He was one of the people. They went to his house. His fund is down 9% in December, 52% in 2011. And one of the things he's down heavy in 2011, the 52%, is the gold and silver. That got destroyed several months back. A lot of people got wiped out in that. Okay, blue gold investment down 34%. And I told you several months ago on this show that hedge funds were going down. The hedge funds are largely going down. And they're going to take big banks down with them because their top holdings are all big banks, and that's strategically. They go down, the big banks go down. So that's why hedge funds can get bailout money too. Spain's first hedge fund is set to liquidate. Mitt Romney, former hedge fund manager, investment bank / hedge fund manager for Bain Capital, says he won't release his tax returns. Of course he won't. He said he probably would not release his tax returns if he becomes Republican nominee for president. Of course he wouldn't. He certainly doesn't want you to know what Bain Capital has been doing. Hedge fund / investment bank. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that pretty much is hedge fund news for this week. So we're going to go to some awesome music. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about much more. Moving on to other great subjects and so forth. So Stick around, the Mark David Show. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Mark David Show, where the truth is a conspiracy. Okay, so we just talked about some financial news and so forth. There's some really actually important news going on in what's called the currency war that I've been talking about a lot on the show. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what's been going on with what's going on in Asia and the currency war. So here we go.
Fighting out of the blue corner.
The dollar crashes, every single market crashes with it.
And now introducing his opponent. Fighting out of the red corner.
Chinese currency could replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency.
Are you ready? Let's go!
All right, here we go. Okay, so what's happening right now in the currency war is a major development. Japan and China are going to do a currency swap. They're going to use each other's currency. I'm strolling down right now for this article. And basically this is from zerohedge.com. And it's basically Japan is basically has applied to start purchasing the yuan bonds. And so what does that mean? Blah, blah, blah. It sounds really droll and boring. Well, basically, it means what Jim Rickards has said is, China within 5 years or so wants to be the world reserve currency. And what's important is you got to understand that Japan is the world's second largest economy. And you know how you keep hearing this term kick the can and how it's because China keeps buying our bonds, keeps buying our debt. You've heard that for a few years now. Well, Japan also has been doing that. Well, now Japan wants to start buying China bonds because it's a safer bet. As I was just telling you, guys like John Corzine have destroyed the United States' credibility. So this is really big news when you got the second largest economy in the world. Okay, so speaking of China, recently they have warned the European Union. European Union wants to pass a carbon tax on airlines, and China is warning them not to do that. This is from the financialtimes.com. China has warned the European Union to abandon its controversial carbon tax on airlines or risk provoking a global trade war. Okay, so the important thing to understand about carbon tax would be a tax on every single thing you do. Everything, everything, everything. Australia has pushed for this carbon tax. It is like the ultimate central banking scheme. Right? So, and I'm not siding with China on this or necessarily. What I'm just simply saying is, you got to give credit to Alex Jones on this one. Whether you like Alex Jones or not, he's been calling this carbon tax thing for a long time. All right. Also, there's an interesting article while we're talking about foreign countries for a second, on Press TV, presstv.ir. How is climate changing affecting Africa's development? And Africa, of course, is very related to China because China gets a lot of resources from Africa. Okay, so speaking of carbon tax as a potential solution, this interesting article talks about how climate is basically devastating Africa, which we all know from growing up. Africa's climate, many parts of Africa's climate are devastated as it is. So anyway, that's what's going on in the currency war. What's going on in the foreign markets. China recently, a lot of articles about China slowing down tremendously. China's bubbles may potentially be about to burst, of course, with Japan stepping in and buying their bonds. That'll be interesting to kind of see where that goes. Okay, so I'm going to go on to some bizarro news. These are news that just really bizarre subjects.
Where everything is the opposite of things we know.
Be tired of always fighting for truth, justice, and American way.
Okay, this is an interesting bizarro story. Did mold kill Brittany Murphy? and this is from the Daily Beast. You know, actress Brittany Murphy. She was in the movie 8 Mile, among others. But you might recognize her. She was the gal that Eminem was in love with and fell in love with Eminem. Anyway, the interesting thing about this is that roughly a year, this says here in the Daily Beast, roughly a year after Britney's death, her husband, Simon Monjack, passed away as well. But Sharon Murphy wasn't convinced that toxic mold killed them both until past summer while selling their home. A coroner had previously ruled that pneumonia and anemia were among the causes of death, but suggested that the LA Health Department check their Hollywood home for mold, and she did, and found lots of mold. And that toxic black mold is pretty nasty stuff now, right? Now, immediately when Brittany Murphy died, I remember it was immediately ruled because of drugs. That was like the immediate cause of death that was declared. And so, anyway, I thought that was a very interesting Bizarro story. Okay, moving on down the Bizarro line. Superhero Crusaders. This is from New York Times. And it's loading up. Some Crusaders in Salt Lake City. Mostly bored guys, and there's a video that goes with it. It's actually a pretty interesting story. But anyway, these basically Dungeons and Dragons types people, they design their own their own costumes, and they walk around the streets of Salt Lake City at night. And they don't really carry weapons, and it's just kind of like a citizen watch. It's like a militia, only without guns and instead they have weird costumes. So anyway, I thought that was a really interesting story. That's from New York Times. So you might want to look at that. And basically it just kind of follows one of them, and he's a tattoo artist. And he just likes dark, weird stuff like that. Okay. This is a little more serious of a story. This is from presstv.ir. This is from December 20th. Fearing terrorism, U.S. asked journals to censor article on virus. And it basically says that a virus which is being experimented on by scientists in the United States, they're afraid that terrorists will understand how to use this virus, will know where to get it, will know the components, and they'll spread it. And so they're asking these science and nature journals not to be too explicit about this virus. And it's the first time ever this has ever happened that in known journalist history, that at least that's what they're saying in this article. Now, the thing about it is why are we making this stuff? I mean, I understand we gotta study it, but what you need to look up sometime you get a chance is how many college professors, particularly from the University of Chicago, which was founded by the Rockefeller family, by the way, look up how many professors have died recently from doing lab experiments. Just for your own, amusement, whatever. All right, so the last of the Bizarro stories. And this is from the dailymail.co.uk. This was from the 23rd of December. Wealthy Chinese couple forced to flee their home after neighbors discover they have 8 babies. So they're a wealthy family in China. They're getting kicked out of their home because they have 8 babies. And remember, China has a very strict 1-baby policy. And it's like, okay, well, hold on. They have 8 kids. You're going to kick them out of their house? What? Seriously. And number 2, they're obviously wealthy enough to feed 8 babies. Maybe they had 7 girls. They didn't want to take them out in the woods and dump them off like they do in China, supposedly. I mean, seriously, that's horrible. You can kick them out of their house. I mean, if they're wealthy, they have a fine. And this is just kind of like your carbon tax. That's what the carbon tax kind of is. It's just kind of this whole, we're going to, you can only have 1 baby. There's too many babies. You can only have 1. We have enough sweatshop workers. Thanks anyway. It's just like, this is just so far-reaching at this point. Enough, Yeah, there's a lot of poverty in China. They actually have had wages going up in China. But like I said, they have enough sweatshop workers. They don't need people breeding. But again, this family apparently can feed 8. Think about this just for a second. Hold on. I'm going to rant on this one just for a minute. You're wealthy enough. You're in China. You're wealthy enough that you can have not only have 8 kids to take care of, you can also hide it from everyone for a long time. That's how wealthy you are. Duh. You shouldn't lose your home. What are they going to do? Yeah, hopefully they're wealthy enough they're just going to buy a new home, but they got 8 kids. Remember that show 8 is Enough? I'm just saying. Now, in general, we over here in the United States, arrogant empire that we are, we probably don't want Chinese people having 8 kids at a time right now. That's just our desire, though. But hey, Japan's going to buy their bonds. You know? I don't know. And the thing of it is, too, hey, they got those ghost cities over in China. Plenty of homes for these kids to live in. I'm just saying. Why are governments throwing people out of their homes who have 8 kids? Because they have 8 kids. I just hope we don't see that here in the United States. But you know darn well that's exactly kind of where it's headed. So anyway, all right, we're going to go to some music.